Ladies and gentlemen, as you all are aware, it is about the 1st of July. And what that means is that we're going to have another post by another paid shill talking about gacha revenue. And boy, oh boy, is there a lot of stuff for us to cover with this reveal today for June 2025, because we've gotten a bit of a behind the scenes look at some Discord servers that are essentially proving the active amount of manipulation and misinformation that is present in this chart, as well as the involvement of this specific user in some very, very, very shady communities. This Trixie person, I don't know how you pronounce it, maybe it's Trick Shit, they're involved in the Discord of Gateo, if you're familiar with them. So without further ado, let's just go ahead, let's get right into the thread and then start looking at some of the numbers and then talk about, how the cookie is essentially crumbling over here, because there's a lot for us to take in when it comes to how stuff is looking. So these are going to be those overall projections, right? We're going to have Genshin Impactor out here at number 1. We're going to have Love and Deep Space Pokemon TCG following it up second. Do keep in mind, these are all going to be estimations of mobile-only revenue. It will not count platforms like PC, PS5, maybe even PS4 too if games run on that. I'm not really sure nowadays, as well as, platforms like Steam, so on and so forth. And so, for games like Love and Deep Space and Pokemon TCG, the numbers actually over here should be a somewhat faithful representation of what the numbers actually are, because, well, you can't play these games on any platform other than mobile. But for a lot of the other stuff that's available, think your Genshin Impactos, your Wuthering Waves, your ZZZs, and your HSRs, well, they're available on a couple of others. So that's just the overall disclaimer heading on into this. But what you're going to find later is that seems like there's been a bit more cookery going on behind the scenes. So next up, in terms of like the bigger gacha games, right? We're going to have Wuthering Waves actually third out of the big 4, with Zenless Zone Zero with its 2.0 release directly right behind it. And then at the bottom, kind of rounding us out, we're going to have Honkai Star Rail, apparently not seeing as much success with the release of Cypher, the cat girl that everyone was really, talking about, was so amazing, and Hyacinth, both of those banners combined. I think that, unfortunately, it seems like last month was really where a lot of the excitement was, but you all know we're probably going to see numbers like this balloon like crazy during that Fate collab, because of course, you got to spend 200 pulls to get Archer's Light Cone. So, overall, a lot of Wuthering Waves players, or even, fans of ZZZ, they might be happy to look at these numbers, right? Once again, these mobile estimations, and think, oh boy, looks like Wuthering Waves 2.4 finally put us back on the map, or looks like Zenless Zone Zero 2.0 really actually popped off. But there's a couple of realizations that need to be had behind the scenes here, ladies and gentlemen. There's a couple of exposés that we need to talk about. And the first and foremost being, well, the history that this website and this data curation has had in the space. Because what you're going to find over here is something that's really, really, really suspicious. So what you're looking at is the Chinese revenue on that revenue website that's being publicly advertised on r/gacha gaming. That's Wuthering Waves' CN revenue for the past couple of months. And as you can see over here, this isn't including this month, the numbers stayed literally the same, with absolutely no growth for the past 3 months. This is May, this is April, this is March. Really, really, really interesting how those numbers stayed exactly the same. And then the second after this bit of data gets posted, it turns out we have apparently some adjustments. And it turns out, boy oh boy, it's just a straight doubling. It's a straight doubling, right? I would understand if the numbers were maybe, 110% higher, 75% higher. But isn't it incredibly interesting how it looks like the revenue was just 2x'd? And then when you read a little bit closer and you see some of the Discord messages that are involving the owner of this website, you'll come to even more realizations. You see Zenless Zone Zero out here on top, despite having a way lower revenue in CN. Let's take a look. So, this will just be some additional glue for later. You remember that person that we were just talking about? This is the person that uploads and curates the website. You'll see that they have some Discord messages over here. Time to delay tomorrow PvP. They're the OP on all the r/gacha gaming posts. And these are their messages on the Discord. of Gateo. Holy shit, the Gacha police are the most brain-dead people I've ever seen. They're just straight-up bots, not even Wuwa players. And as you can see over here, these are the messages that are getting sent out. Bunch of people shit-talking Wuthering Waves. We got somebody over here asking, and what if ZZZ wins overall anyways? And then we have this request. Did you adjust numbers to make Zenless Zone Zero higher? I hope so. Push the agenda. Which is essentially confirmation, right? This person has the freedom. This tricksy person has the freedom to go ahead, manipulate and change numbers whenever they want to suit whatever agenda they're trying to drive. And the worst thing about all of this, right? Or really, the most hilarious thing about all of this is the fact that there's literal proof on record of this happening. Active manipulation of the numbers that they're advertising as genuine and that they're asking people to draw conclusions on. And to cover their tracks, they just went ahead and 2x'd it. But of course, right, they had to make sure that Zenless Zone Zero was out on top because they just simply 2x'd Wuthering Waves and they 5x'd ZZZs. Ladies and gentlemen, these numbers are supposed to come off of estimations and projections. I genuinely don't think that these individuals even have the CN numbers, and they're just pulling random shit out of their asshole. They're genuinely just pulling out random numbers out of their asshole, putting random multipliers on them, because how is everything so aligned? How is everything so perfect? To the degree where it's just straight up, it's a straight multiple, isn't it? They're just putting on straight multiples, a ×2 on here and a ×5 on here for fun, to be able to suit the narratives that they're driving in their own Discord. And then you have the hilarious moderators on this r/gacha gaming subreddit going ahead, even making pin posts, essentially validating this data as real, or really real enough to talk about on the subreddit. Because a thread like this, when you know the active amount of manipulation that's happening behind the scenes, it should just be locked immediately. This person, this tricksy person, when there's proof of the manipulation that they're doing on private discords, they should just be banned from this subreddit completely. This website should have no reason to be on here. Discussions like these should not be had. But of course, right, who cares about manipulation? Who cares about all of that when you are a subreddit full of bum-ass losers like r/gacha gaming that are desperate for the one time of the month that you have relevancy in the space? It is what it is, right? And this is the thing. This is where it gets even stinkier. When you see all of the actual glue, when you see all of the actual external data that's talking about revenue numbers. We got one post over here from Narushio. Wuthering Waves is ranked #1 on the Japanese sales charts for the week of June 13th to June 16th. Interesting. Interesting. That's JP's data. And you can see over here, we've even got Sensor Tower themselves, right? Where this data is coming from. Sensor Tower themselves is showing Wuthering Waves in first place. And Sensor Tower is where all of this data is supposed to be from. What else do we have over here? Apparently there's more in this thread over here of just more crazy comments. Oh, look at who we found once again, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, this wasn't meant to be a video on the rat in the gachas, in the rat in the woo-wah space, but I guess she'll just show up because once again your Discord messages are public. Yeah. It's just a history, right, of people going ahead, having agreements with the r/gacha gaming subreddit. You can probably see like some messages over here. Yep, they're all aligned. They're all shaking hands together in the quest to spread misinformation. And now we've got a post over here about Cartithia. Apparently, out of all of the S6 characters in the game, in CN, from the data they've been able to scrub, Cartithia has the 4th highest ownership rate out of all characters, and 20% are apparently S6 Cartithias. Yeah. You can see over here, that 6 number on the side, that shows like a relatively low percent for different characters, right? Shorekeeper 1.4, Chameleon 9.05, Cartithia is just out here at 20. Yeah, and if you know how S6 characters work, they're definitely cheaper in Wuthering Waves, but they're still not free. They're still pretty expensive. And that is a staggering differential compared to pretty much every other character in the game when we're looking at it. And so, does it make sense with all of this data that we're seeing, all of this potential glue, to simply just have a straight up doubling on the previous numbers? Or is it that because there's not really official numbers, official news reports, posts like these for CN, right, that explicitly show certain games on top. Well, it looks like they're taking every single opportunity possible, ladies and gentlemen, to just make up more and more and more shit. Oh boy. And so, this is the other thing. We've even got posts themselves showing that Wuthering Waves is actually on top in China. You can see over here, ZZZ's 18, Wuthering Waves is 16. We got things from the official stores showing that Wuthering Waves is actually on top. But over here, suddenly it's not. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I think you're all beginning to see. I think it's all becoming abundantly clear what exactly is going on in this subreddit and what exactly is going on with whoever's in charge of this chart and the data that they're showing. If I'm a Zenless Zone Zero player, I now have a massive amount of scrutiny for all of the stuff that I'm seeing. The reason for that is it's clear that the success of 2.0, that 2.0's numbers, especially according to this chart, are being heavily astroturfed. And one thing for certain is that Wuthering Waves 2.4 had essentially taken the thunder of ZZZ 2.0 completely. When ZZZ 2.0 was that anniversary patch, it was the patch where you had, you know, your whole new region expansion, and it's going ahead and nobody is talking about it. It got completely, absolutely, 1000% obliterated and wiped off the map by the introduction of Septimon. And what narratives like this are only showing is it's giving a false sense of security to that player base and making them believe that their game is actually doing a lot better than it actually is. When 2.0 is, without a doubt, one of the most disappointing 2.0 updates in the history of Gacha. You might look at these numbers and just assume that, wow, 2.0 actually changed everything. The changes that they're making to the game are for the better. When in reality, it is getting propped up by actual freaks whose only mission is to simply make Wuthering Waves look worse than what it actually is. And they're using fake ZZZ numbers to try to build that narrative. Your game's numbers and its performance are simply being manipulated to actively attack another game. And all of the evidence is right here, all of the proof. How else can you view a straight 5x multiplier on what is going on with your revenue? Or sorry, is maybe a 6x. I'm not super sure, right? Quick mental math. They're just putting on straight multipliers on your revenue numbers. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as you can all see, the discussions that they're bound to have in this subreddit are likely absolutely pointless. So why don't we just go ahead, but for some fun, see what's going on. And we don't want to look at best, we want to sort by controversial, because I want to see what type of stuff is getting upvoted and what type of stuff is getting downvoted. Wuwa deserves all the money. Can't wait for 2.5. I wonder why that's in controversial. Wuwa beating ZZZ anniversary with one banner. Cartithia solos. I wonder why that comment is hidden. Genshin killer fails once again. I think most people would agree Genshin is pretty close to dead at this point. Wuwa couldn't beat Genshin, so its players moved the goalpost to ZZZ now. Boy, oh boy. I wonder how much of the Genshin revenue is also being actively manipulated on this chart. I wonder how much of it is actually occurring. Because when we go ahead and apparently we take CN completely out of the equation. This is a curated chart by Sarah of the Abyss. When we take CN out of the equation completely, apparently, this is what some of the stuff is looking like. With Wuthering Waves, by these mobile projections, only about 6 million behind when we discount CN. But suddenly, when we incorporate CN's, you can see over here, right, 6.28 million. But when we incorporate CN's numbers, which we know are actively being manipulated and have been for Wuthering Waves, that gap widens from 6 million to 25. Yeah, 19 million additional dollars in delta from that happening. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. 6 million apart in global and 20 million apart. 19 to 20 million apart in CN. Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Genshin Impact numbers were fake too. And so this is why, ladies and gentlemen, you always have to take these revenue reports with a grain of salt. Because there's always going to be somebody behind the scenes that's despite the fact that there's public data, public reports from these stores showing certain narratives, well, why does that matter when you can just cook random numbers behind the scenes and just add bullshit multipliers to certain regions, or in some cases, just keep the revenue same for several months? Who cares, right? And so at the end of the day, I would just view it as, which of these games is clearly expressing success? What's Wuthering Waves doing? It's gradually making the game look better and better every single patch, incorporating new technologies, actually expanding. They're expanding their portfolio of games into Project Nami. Or are you going to look at the game like Zenless Zone Zero or Genshin Impact that have stagnated, not improved their storytelling, actually downgraded their storytelling in situations like ZZZ, and have frankly only gotten worse? Or games like Honkai Star Rail that have only added more and more predatory practices in the past 2 patches than they have in the history of the game. Is Honkai Star Rail truly doing that well if they have had 2 spending events in 3 patches? 2 whale spending events in 3 patches. You should look at what's happening in the games instead of what's happening with these numbers. Skirk and Mavuika, the biggest power creep that the game has ever seen. They've stopped using character design and story as a way to sell characters. They've also had an endgame mode that is literally only completable by having C6 characters. What's the point of looking at these revenue numbers when you can just look at what's going on in these games? It's become a whale fest. It's downgraded in quality. It's also become a whale fest with multiple spending events. Which one smells more like money desperate to you in reality? And the truth is, the Hoyoverse games are starting to look really, really, really fucking desperate. So yeah, that'll be that, ladies and gentlemen. I think we provided all the glue, all the receipts. I think that, it's always great when this chart drops once a month because we just get to expose and talk about the biggest rats in the space. So yeah, let me know what you all think. Peace.